Welcome to the deep dive. We've got this fascinating pile of interviews and old clips you sent over, all centered on this one incident, maybe one of the most talked about, the hardest to pin down, moments in West Coast rap history. We're talking about that legendary clash between Tupac Shakur and, well, a major force in Bay Area independent rap back in the early 90s. So our mission today is pretty clear. Dig through all the stories, the oral history surrounding that Fillmore Street confrontation, try and sort out what we can actually verify as fact versus, what's become this enduring piece of hip-hop lore for the region. And setting the scene is crucial here. We got to picture it. Early 90s, San Francisco. Tupac's playing gigs locally. He's right on the edge of becoming huge. But the local scene, it's dominated by these fiercely independent artists, real local heavyweights. And the sources really emphasize the role of this one artist from the Fillmore, the founder of Get Low Records. Let's nail the pronunciation right off the bat, based on what we found. It's JT the Bigga Figga, not Figga.
Right. And the atmosphere back then. You can't overstate it. The Bay Area club scene wasn't just buzzing. Sources call it fractious. Really intense local loyalties, neighborhood politics playing out everywhere.
So it was tense.
Oh, yeah. And Tupac, he represented something different. This rising star kind of operating outside that established, very local first system you had in places like the Fillmore.
That definitely sets up a potential conflict, doesn't it? You have this huge star coming into a place defined by its own local heroes. Sparks could fly.
Exactly. And that's the challenge for us looking back. Most of what we have is testimony, stories told years, even decades later. So our goal today is to really look closely at JT's claims, see how consistent they are, then compare them to what other key people from that time, like San Quinn or Richie Rich, have said. And crucially, what does the lack of official records from the time tell us about how this kind of history gets made or remembered?
Okay, let's unpack this primary account then, the one that really sparked the whole legend.
Right, so the bedrock of this whole story is JT the Bigga Figga's own account. He's told this story multiple times, very consistently, in long interviews over the years. Vlad TV, No Jumper, places like that. These aren't just quick mentions, they're detailed recollections. And they frame this event as absolutely central to Fillmore history.
And the specifics he gives are pretty vivid. He places it around 91, maybe 92, at a club or concert venue in the Fillmore where Tupac was. And the core claim, the action itself, is that his crew confronted Tupac. They jumped him, physically got the upper hand.
And it wasn't just about the fight itself, it was about taking symbols, trophies. The loot, as it's described, is really specific in JT's telling. He says they took Tupac's herringbone chain, a ring, his watch, and even a phone.
Whoa, the herringbone chain, that was the status symbol back then in hip-hop. Taking that's not just a mugging, it's like a public statement, right? A challenge to his status. Basically saying, you might be big time elsewhere, but we run things here.
Absolutely. That's precisely the point. And it ties straight back to this concept JT always emphasizes, Fillmore pride. He frames this whole thing as like necessary street politics. It was about solidifying his crew's position, his own standing. Remember, he wasn't just rapping. He was building Get Low Records, this independent label. So for him, this confrontation becomes this foundational story. It proves his street cred, his influence. It paints him as the guy who stood up to this national figure on his home turf.
That narrative is incredibly powerful for JT, obviously. But is he the only one telling a story like this? Or are there others?
No, he's definitely not alone in remembering something happening. And here's where it gets really interesting, because the basic idea that some kind of scuffle, some kind of confrontation involving Tupac went down to the Fillmore around that time, that's actually pretty widely corroborated.
Yeah.
We have accounts from other key players in the Bay Area scene who lend support, at least circumstantially, to the idea that a big fight occurred.
All right, who else remembers this?
Well, the most prominent comparison point is probably Bay Area rapper San Quinn. He's also done interviews where he talks about how he and his people jumped Tupac. He describes a similar kind of scuffle, maybe at the Fillmore, maybe the Stone Theater nearby, around that same period.
So San Quinn claims his crew jumped Tupac, not JT's.
Exactly. And then you have other figures like Richie Rich, the Gov, and other guys from the 415 area code. They've also referenced Tupac getting into a serious fight, a brawl in the Fillmore back then. Sometimes you even see old fan footage pop up online showing just how chaotic those early 90s shows could be in the Fillmore. So it just shows the general vibe, the potential for conflict was definitely there.
Okay, so putting that together, it seems pretty clear that Tupac was involved in some kind of physical, maybe violent run-in somewhere in the Fillmore or Oakland area in the early 90s. That much seems solid.
Yes. The basic event, a scuffle involving Tupac, is highly credible. What's fascinating, though, is where the stories start to diverge. And that divergence, that's like textbook oral history in action. The sources show agreement on the what of fight, but the when exactly, the precise where, and crucially, who were the main players who took what items. That differs depending on who's telling the story.
It almost sounds like it was such a chaotic event that multiple groups might have felt involved or maybe wanted to claim they were the main ones afterwards. Like everyone wanted a piece of the story of confronting Tupac.
That's a very real possibility. When you're assessing these kinds of accounts, years later, you have to consider things like memory drift, right? Memories fade or change. And also selective emphasis. If you've got, say, 5 different crews potentially involved or nearby during a chaotic street fight, it's only natural that years down the line, each main figure telling the story, whether it's JT or San Quinn, might subconsciously or consciously emphasize their own crew's role.
Yeah.
Make it seem central.
Yeah, I can see that. One person remembers the chain specifically, another remembers the watch and the phone being taken.
Right. It doesn't necessarily mean someone is outright lying, but it definitely highlights how personal narratives get constructed. There's an element of, well, self-aggrandizement. Everyone involved, or even near the incident, might want to claim a piece of that legendary confrontation with the guy who became Tupac. It builds their own status.
So it's like this collective memory of chaos, but it's filtered through each person's need to establish their own place in the story, their own importance.
Perfectly put. And that leads us straight into the critical assessment part. Because despite these really compelling, vivid stories from multiple respected artists, we hit this major roadblock, this historical weakness, the lack of a paper trail from the time.
Right. The official documentation. Or lack thereof. But wait, why should we automatically trust, say, a police report or the absence of one over the shared memory of an entire scene? If all these key players agree a fight happened, isn't that pretty strong evidence?
That's the absolute core tension here. You're right, the collective memory strongly suggests the event, the fight, occurred. But to verify the specific claim JT's crew jumped Tupac and robbed him of these exact items, you really need that contemporaneous objective evidence. And when you search the archive of major Bay Area newspapers like the SF Chronicle or look for public legal records from that time, there's just no police report, no credible news article that has surfaced explicitly documenting JT the Bigga Figga being charged with assaulting Tupac or confirming a robbery of those specific items occurred involving him.
Huh. That silence is pretty loud, isn't it? If you successfully rob one of the hottest rising stars in rap of his signature jewelry, you'd think that would make some kind of official noise, right? A police investigation, maybe even a small news brief. Especially involving someone becoming as famous as Tupac.
From a purely historical documentation standpoint, yes, you'd expect something, some kind of ripple. And the absence of that forces us to conclude that what we're working with here is predominantly oral history, told years after the fact. So while the general story, Tupac getting targeted and roughed up in the Fillmore, feels very credible based on the multiple accounts, GT's specific role in overpowering him and taking every single one of those items, that remains unverified by dated third-party sources.
Okay, so let me try and synthesize this. The story JT tells is incredibly consistent across his own interviews over the years, and the general idea of a fight involving Tupac in that area around that time is backed up by other people too, but without that concrete, dated record, a police report, a court filing, a news story from 91 or 92 naming JT, we can't elevate it from really strong, well-attested anecdote to confirmed historical fact. Is that fair?
That's exactly the assessment, yeah. It exists firmly in that space of powerful oral history, a foundational story for the Fillmore scene. It tells us maybe more about the local power dynamics and the importance of street credibility there than it does about a specific documented crime involving Tupac.
Right, it's become part of the Fillmore identity almost.
Precisely. And if we zoom out, connect this to the bigger picture, this whole legend, regardless of the precise details, tells us a couple of really important things about that early 90s Bay Area hip-hop scene.
Okay, what are the main takeaways?
Well, first, it's a stark reminder that even artists who were becoming global superstars like Tupac were not insulated from street-level dangers and local politics. Success didn't automatically grant you a free pass everywhere. You still had to navigate these really intense local turf dynamics.
That makes sense. The streets still had their own rules.
And the second big takeaway is about how hip-hop history itself, especially at the regional level, often gets recorded. It highlights the huge role, the dominance, really, of oral history. For scenes like the Fillmore, maybe where official records didn't always capture the full picture or were less accessible. These key moments, these scene-defining incidents, they survive primarily through interviews, through stories passed down, through the collective memory of the people who were there. Not always through the police blotter or the newspaper archives.
So wrapping it up, the most likely scenario seems to be, yes, a serious, probably violent confrontation involving Tupac definitely happened in the Fillmore area, likely around 91, 92.
Yeah, that seems almost certain.
But the specific detailed account where JT the Bigga Figga and his crew single-handedly overpowered him and took all that specific jewelry, that's best understood as really powerful, consistently told oral history.
A story that became vital, perhaps even necessary, for defining the identity and the reputation of that particular scene and its key players. It's a well-attested legend rather than incontrovertible fact.
Which leaves us with a pretty interesting thought to chew on, doesn't it? Think about how many iconic stories in music history, the ones that really define artists or eras, are built almost entirely on this kind of shared memory, on anecdotes told and retold.
Exactly. And what's the actual cultural weight of a legend like that? A story everyone believes that shapes identities, even if it lacks that official stamp of verification. How does that compare to a cold, documented fact?
And maybe even what happens when a particular story, true or not, actually benefits everyone involved in the telling.
Right. If the challenger gets status from claiming the victory, and the established star gains a sort of rugged survivor mystique from having endured it, does the precise objective truth even matter as much to the culture that embraces the story?
So what does this all mean? We'll let you decide.